Welcome back to another episode of Called to Serve, where we profile people who have given their life in service to the church. God calls many people in service to the church: priests, deacons, religious sisters and brothers, and even lay men and women who serve the church in awesome ways as well. Today, we welcome to our broadcast Father Larry Rymes. Father Larry is the pastor of Our Lady of Hope and St. Anthony's Parish in Sudbury, Ontario. He's a familiar face to you. He's been a priest in our diocese for over 28 years. And so, Father Larry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Called to Serve.
Thank you for having me.
So this pandemic obviously has changed your normal routine. What sort of things have you been doing in the last few months while our churches have been closed?
Yes, the pandemic has altered my routine, as by nature, I can't stop. I have to go from one thing to the next. And so what I did right away when the COVID started is I went through my parish list and divided it up between myself and the parish secretary. And we started to call parishioners to see how they were doing, but also to get their email address so we could continue to communicate with them. And so that took a while. And then with the COVID, my secretary couldn't come in and work in the office. And so I had to do all the secretarial work. And that's when I got creative with doing the bulletin so I could communicate to the people we called on the phone through the email. And that's when I discovered the miracle of broadcasting on the internet. And I said, well, I got to keep in touch with my people somehow. Half of them, if not all of them, know how to go on the computer. So I started to broadcast my homilies. And I got kind of creative with the homilies. Instead of preaching from a pulpit, I kind of staged my homilies and had props and got creative. I knew they were watching you, Father Daniele, for the Mass, as in our bulletins we referenced you. And I knew they were watching maybe the bishop at Christ the King celebrating Mass or the Pope in Rome. So I wanted to do something a little different. So I went into the, I don't know what you call it, video broadcasting. I grew up in the 80s, so I call it like Wayne's World, where you broadcast from your rec room in your basement.
But I give you kudos because you were really creative. In some of your videos, you were at Tim Hortons out in the driveway, going through the drive-through. You were on your motorcycle. You were taking a walk on Delki Dozy. Really creative stuff. Where did you come up with that?
Well, when you're forced to stay at home, your creative juices just started flowing. So it came from being in quarantine, and I guess from the power of prayer.
Okay, so let's put the pandemic aside and talk a little bit about your own journey as a priest. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, you've been a priest for 28 years, just this past May. And so you're a familiar face to a lot of people. But what about before you were a priest? We talk about how God calls people. And did you always think growing up that you would be a priest, or were you doing something else as you were going through high school and university?
Well, growing up, church was always a part of our family life. As a family, we went to church every Sunday. And then when the parish went to having Sunday Mass on a Saturday night, well, we went to church Saturday night, which became a bit of a problem when I was a teenager because all my friends went out Saturday night and I had to go to church with my family. So church was a part of our lives. But by nature, I was excellent in math and physics and in science. So too were my brother and my sister. And when it came to deciding what I wanted to do with a career, my first choice was an engineer. And my family, my father, my grandfather, my uncles, my brother, were all employed by the utility. Back in the old days, it was called Ontario Hydro. Now it's called OPG or Hydro One. So I was destined to be an electrical engineer working for the hydroelectric utility. And I enjoyed that way of thinking and that study. So I went to University of Toronto to study electrical engineering.
And at what point did you sense that God was calling you to do something different, to serve as a priest?
Well, the point where I sensed the call to being a priest, I think it was back when I was younger, and it was that the priest was always a respected person within our family, within our extended family. The church was always a part of who we are, and the church was kind of like a moral compass for us. And you celebrate Christmas, celebrate Easter, you celebrate Sunday, the Sabbath. It was important. And so, although engineering was my first choice, my second choice, I say plan B, was priesthood, because I saw it as a profession, much like as an accountant or as a doctor, or as a lawyer. And then there was a clergyman. And to be a priest, you had to go to university, get a master's degree. So it wasn't, let's say, fly-by-night profession. It was something respected within my culture, my family, and so that was a plan B. And so when I started to think of plan B was when plan A wasn't working out. I give an example. I'd go to class at University of Toronto and be in a classroom of, there was 120 students in my engineering class, and I'd fall asleep. I never fell asleep in school in my life. I loved school. Or when it came to studying for an exam or just a quiz, I hated studying. I never studied. That never happened to me before. And then the funny part was, I'd passed the test. I passed the quiz. I was doing okay. And at the end, I was scratching my head. I had hair back then. And I'm saying, how the heck am I passing without even knowing what's going on? And that was maybe an experience of the call, as in what I was doing then, wasn't settling with me, within my heart. And it said, Larry, I think you have to look at other options. And so I put my engineering studies on hold after 2 years. And then I took a year off. But I didn't take a year off to go find myself or travel Europe. I took a year off to go back to school and to study philosophy and world religions. And it was like using a different part of your brain. They say that science and engineering is the left brain function. Well, I went to the right brain function. And it was hard. Actually, it was harder than engineering and science and math, having to think outside the box, having to properly communicate, and to write essays and to read volumes of reading, which I never had to do before. And it was harder than engineering.
When you decided to finally go to the seminary, what was the reaction of your family when you told them that was, you're putting your engineering life behind you and you were going to go try out the seminary for a while?
I must say it was, I got affirmation 100%. From my friends, from my classmates in engineering, and from my family. I thought maybe they would be, oh no, don't do this. But it was a support. The only person who was hesitant was my mother, because I'm the youngest in my family, and my mother felt that I needed a wife to take care of me, and so that's what was her worry was.
She was just being a mom, making sure you were taken care of for the rest of your life. Eh?
Exactly. And then she's always critical of my brother's wife, as in she wasn't doing a good enough job of taking care of my brother. So there you go figure.
Well, you ended up not having to put up with that stress, I guess. Eh? You mentioned some priests that you looked up to, role models. Maybe you said you saw priests functioning as sort of good citizens of the community and role models for people. Who were some of those priests in your life that maybe left a lasting impression with you?
Yes, well, growing up, the parish priest, I we had a camp in Mattawa, as my mom's family is from Mattawa, and actually we lived in Mattawa. I'm the youngest, so we moved when I was 6 years old. And the parish priest there, the priest actually who had baptized me, was instrumental. Monsignor Goudreau is a very kind man. And then when we went to North Bay, my home parish was your parish, Holy Name of Jesus, and the priests there were always excellent and kind to us. One priest, I remember, heard my, I did my first confession with a priest from Holy Name, and it was in the closet, I remember, because we did it at the school and we used the janitorial closet. So I was making my confession beside a broom and a mop or something. But there is a priest who's still alive. He's retired now, Father Jim Hutton. He was a priest who got me to be an altar server. And he twisted my arm. And I was only an altar server for a year and a half, and I had enough of that. But Father Jim was always a good soul. And again, it was a very positive image that they had, positive affirmation, and good examples. And then even when I went to university, went to Toronto, I went to the Newman Center for Mass, and the priests there were always excellent. So you may hear negative things about the priests, but I never came across that in my life.
So you've been a priest 28 years. You've been to a number of parishes in the diocese. What sticks out for you as a challenge you've had in the priesthood? You talked about challenges you faced in engineering and studies and all these different things, and God led you to be a priest. So that doesn't come without any challenges. What are some of the challenges you faced as a priest?
The challenge that I've always faced is not necessarily as a priest, it's as a pastor. Because when you're a pastor, you become like a manager. And the challenge is the behind the scenes management of a church. And it's requires skills that I was never taught in the seminary for, or I never got anywhere. Like, for example, when the secretary can't come to church because of COVID, well, then who does what she does? It ended up being me, the priest. When there's a roof leak or there's things that need to get repaired, who's the person who gets it done? It's the priest. And who's the person who's got to initiate the fundraising? Who's the person who's got to dot the I's and cross the T's? It's the pastor. And that even comes from head office, the bishop's office. They put all the responsibility of this temporal affair stuff on the pastor, and we're not trained, and maybe we're not even of that mindset. So that's the stress within being a pastor. The preaching, no problem. The funerals, the weddings, the Sunday Mass, no problem. That's a joy. That's where I get my strength from. And I miss doing the Sunday Eucharist. Going to the schools with the kids, love it. If you're having a bad day, I always go to the school and my day becomes good. So the ministry part where I'm trained has not been a challenge. It's been the non-priest stuff.
So you mentioned your challenges, and you've shared some blessings with us as well. Looking now where you are at this moment as a priest, and some of the changes that are happening, not just with our pandemic, but in the world today, less people are practicing their faith. How do you see the church being important to people today? How do we bring Jesus, in your mind, to people today with all your experience that you've had?
Good question. And if there is an answer, tell me. But I think by nature, the human person is spiritual. And I think our culture is getting their spirit fed by, their toys, by their money, by their hobbies. And so the church doesn't necessarily make them feel good as much as, their PlayStation or what have you. But people are by nature spiritual. So if when people come to me or come across me, and if I can kind of touch something in their heart or in their mind to get them to appreciate God working in their life, well, to me, that's a success. We have, like, in my ministry, I still have people wanting children to be baptized, still have people, their kids that make their sacraments, first communion, confirmation, the culture is still there. Just the regular Sunday mass attendance is not there. So maybe the question is, how do you get people to go to church every Sunday?
It's definitely a challenge that churches across the world are facing. So you're talking about touching the hearts and minds of people in a particular way today in our service in service of the church. What would you say to a young person in today's world who feels that God is calling them to something more, to serve the church? What advice would you give them today?
Don't be afraid and follow the call. Don't be afraid to take a year off and to explore either an academic route like I did with the philosophy, or don't be afraid to take a year off and maybe go and join a religious community to do some service. Do it. You have your youth on your side. You have the interest. Add fuel to that flame, because time goes by fast. The older I go, the older I get. And the last thing you want to do is to be old and regret not exploring a vocation.
Well, you mentioned being old, but you're still considered one of the younger priests in our diocese. So that's must be good news for you. In just a few days, you're going to be reopening your church after a period of the pandemic. What are you looking forward to the most as your parish opens up again?
I'm looking forward to seeing the people again. Being a Catholic means you belong to a big family, and a parishioner, you belong to the parish family. And even though parishioners don't know each other's names, they know each other's faces, know where they sit. So there's a sense of comfort, there's a sense of belonging, and a sense of a community. So I'm looking forward to seeing my people and for them to see me live, not just on a screen.
That's right. One last thing for you. Every time, speaking of your parishioners, when they are in your building, when they hear from you, you always offer them a laugh at the end of your homily or during your mass. And I'm wondering if maybe you have a laugh to offer for us here on this episode of Called to Serve.
I learned at the beginning of my ministry of a priest that you catch more flies, with honey than with vinegar. And so people, oh yeah, what joke does he have? What joke do they have this week? And it's all, in a sense, staged. I'm not a comedian by nature. Maybe my demeanor is funny, but to come up with something of a joke, I have to do my research first. So sorry, Father Daniele, I can't give you a joke offhand. The only thing I can do is repeat what I repeated on my last video that I did This Sunday is Corpus Christi Sunday in Canada. Corpus Christi is celebrated on Thursday, I think, in Rome. And I spoke about the terminology hocus pocus as coming from Corpus Christi, and about a magician. And so I ended it with a one-liner joke. What do you call an owl that does magic?
What?
Houdini.
This is what people get when they come to your parish and seek your
beautiful jokes. There have been better ones than that, but
Father Larry,
be there to appreciate it.
That's right. That's right. Father Larry, thank you very much for giving us your time. You certainly have made a difference in many people's lives in your communities that you serve and in our diocese. You've been a priest that's been a role model even for myself. You were my pastor at one time. And so you've been always a good support to me and support to many people. So thank you for your ministry that you have given the people of God. And thank you for answering the call when God pushed you in that direction to serve as a priest. So thanks again for giving us your time, and God bless you as you open up your church and continue to serve the people of God.
Great, thank you.
And thank you for watching this episode of Called to Serve. We thank Father Larry once again for joining us, and stay tuned for more episodes when we profile other people who have given their life in service to the church. We'll see you next time on Called to Serve.